the next section that we'll be working on will be mindset changing exercises. So, among the mindset changing exercises are reframing, intrusive thoughts and worrying thoughts, cognitive distortions, attitude changing exercises, gratitude and appreciation, journaling and appreciation exercise. So these are things that change the way you look at the world. So these are getting closer to, these are less direct nervous system symptom relief and more getting toward the deeper causes, because what you're thinking is really what's, or believing is what's causing your anxiety. So the first thing to consider, who creates your thoughts?
I do.
Really? Okay, so tell me how.
Well, an idea pops in my head, or maybe
whoa, popped in your head. That's not creating it.
Or I looked at something.
How did you create it?
I looked at something which then like created, you know.
You didn't do that. Where'd it come from?
The synapses in my head.
Do you know how to make one? No, you don't.
No.
Nobody does. Nobody knows where they come from or how to create one, so they're not yours until you give them attention and claim them. I sometimes think of my brain as this antenna that's just sitting here, and there are all of these thoughts wandering around, and it just picks up these random things, because a lot of the things it picks up are not mine. I don't know where they came from, and I don't want them. I used to feel bad about some of the things I thought, because I thought, oh, how could I even think such a thing? Well, I don't know how I thought it, and I'm not going to take responsibility for it, and I'm not even going to pay attention to it anymore. But first, you have to realize that it's not yours until you make it yours by focusing your attention. Because I don't know. There are thoughts that have come to me over the years. You know, some people have violent thoughts, or they'll suddenly think of something horrible happening. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to make that happen. No, I don't know where it came from. I don't know why it's there, but don't claim it. It's not yours. You didn't do it. Just don't. That's my opinion. You can learn how to manage those by not paying attention to them. Anything that I rarely pay attention to anything wandering through my head anymore. I'm sure there are bubbles wandering around up there all the time, but I've learned not to focus on, except for as you learn to have pointed focus and concentration, you don't even notice that nonsense coming through anymore. But it takes a while. But just because a thought comes, or a thought arises, or whatever it is that happens that makes thoughts appear, just because it's there doesn't have anything to do with you until you own it. And when something disturbing comes to mind, you can look at it from a distance. You can observe, well, that's a strange thought. It's not mine. It's not me. That's weird. It's not mine. Create that distance. That's a very strange thing to think. It is a very strange thing to think. And when something that's really pleasant comes along and you like it, focus on it and say, I really like this thought. I think I'll play with this one for a while. But we don't have to let these intrusive thoughts that are disturbing images or whatever, we can say, that's a weird thing to think. I'm not going to pay attention to that. I'm going to go over here and find this fun one that I liked. But this is a practice. It takes a lot of effort, and it becomes easier as you learn to have greater focus and concentration, so that you can yank your attention away from that disturbing thought that appeared. But I don't believe that you have to be responsible for what you think, because I don't know where it came from. I'm not going to be responsible for what I think. Now, I have to be responsible for what I do. But I don't have to be responsible for what I think. Nobody even knows what I think. And that's a good thing. Intrusive thought, an unwelcome or disturbing thought. Oh, something awful, something you remember that was really awful, or something that makes you cringe that you remember that happened to you before. Why did that come up? Even asking that question is attention. So if you can learn to just take a breath and focus on something else, and it will disappear fairly quickly. It requires attention. Where your focus and your consciousness goes, all that attention gives it energy and power. So the less that you can focus on it, the less power it has, and the quicker it will go away. Same is true with emotions. If you suddenly feel really angry, let it go. Let it process. Don't resist. Let it flow through and go right on through. Doesn't need you to resist it or try to trap it or any of that stuff. So you just change your focus to another thought or tap. Just like the toddler we've been talking about, your mind will relentlessly go back to disturbing thoughts because it's become a habit. You've been tormenting yourself for a really long time, but you can stop. It's not going to be something that's going to happen instantly, but part of the relief is recognizing that there's nothing wrong with having these disturbing thoughts. And it's simply a practice of learning to ignore them and redirect yourself. I know that for me, when I would have disturbing thoughts, I thought that there was something wrong with me that made these disturbing thoughts appear, but that's not true. Things just randomly pop up. I don't know why. They do, and they can randomly go away.
I like the antenna that it just sort of comes in, and you can.
I'm already a cell tower. I'm just picking up all sorts of things from wherever they are. So focus your attention on thoughts that are pleasing to you. A similar thing is that we tell ourselves stories about things. We tell ourselves stories about ourselves. And if you're going to tell yourself a story, why not tell one that feels good? You don't have to tell a story to yourself about things that feels bad. You can tell a story that feels good. If you're going to make up a story, make up a good one that feels good. Reframing. This one is really important. It's the process of seeing something disturbing from a different, non-threatening perspective. For example, worrying about what others think about you. Oh, this is common. Everybody is worried about what somebody else is thinking about them. Okay, so can you read minds? No. Well, if you tell me you can, you're going to have to demonstrate because I'm not convinced. But probably not. You probably cannot read minds. Can you ever know what another person is thinking? You can know what they tell you they're thinking, but you can't know what they're thinking because you can't go inside their minds. Can you control what anyone else thinks? No. No matter what you do, they're going to think whatever they think, and it could be random because it's not their thoughts. We don't know where they come from. Would it be appropriate to invade another person's thoughts if you could? I think that's a really bad violation of privacy. I don't want anybody in my head for their benefit and mine. But worrying about what other people think about you is an invasion of their privacy. It's none of your business what someone else thinks unless they tell you. What others think is none of my business. I don't need to know. But even more importantly, no matter how long I worry about it, I can't know what anyone else thinks, and I can't control what they think, no matter what I do. So why waste time?
Yeah, I sometimes spend too much time here. Not
Worried about-
not worrying what other people think, but if someone doesn't do what I think they should do, then I immediately start thinking it's because they don't like me or they weren't, something really stupid. When in reality, it's never that.
Well, it
Never.
might be occasionally, but for the most part, almost always, what anybody does is about them. It doesn't have much of anything to do with you. Whatever I do, whatever I say, whatever I think, whatever I'm doing has to do with what's going on inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And rarely ever does it have anything to do with you. Just doesn't. Sorry. We're all a bit narcissistic. We're all about taking care of our own business. And all those people you're worried about what they think of you, they're all standing there worrying about what you're thinking of them. So what a waste of time. Collective worry. When you notice you're worrying about several things, I find that you can have a swirl that goes on in your head where you worry. And sometimes it's because there are too many things and you haven't scheduled them. So first of all, write them all down. Everything you can think of, just write it down because it's swirling around in there because you're afraid you're going to forget it. All right, write them all down. All right, now I've captured them. They're safe. They're on this piece of paper or in my phone or wherever I put them. Okay, so the ones I can't do anything about, I need to just mark those out. If I can't control it, I don't need to worry about it. The ones that I can control, I need to go back to the prior exercise and I prioritize them and I put them on the calendar and I plan when I'm going to take care of them in the proper order, when they're actually necessary. So now they're scheduled. If I follow my schedule, they'll be handled so I don't have to have them swirling around in my head anymore. And you focus on doing the ones that are due now, and the rest of it is okay because you've got a system to take care of it. Focus your attention on the things you need to do now. New things that start to pile up have to be eliminated or scheduled. That's something you need to do now. And then you actually work on getting the list, taking care of what's on your calendar for today. That's all you have to do, one day at a time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Seems pretty simple.
Yeah, it does. And I was thinking, I'm worried about, is the kid going to pass this class? Are we going to get dinner?
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to writing them down and looking at them and figuring out now which ones can I control. Where the kid passes the class, all I can do is make sure they do their homework.
And maybe help them with their homework if they don't know how to do it.
Right.
Feed them, make sure they get sleep, and that's your job. Done. Yeah. If you're the parent. That's all you can do. You might have to take their phones away to make sure they sleep because the little buggers will sit up all night on their phones. I learned that the hard way. Now that we're learning about managing thoughts, it's time to look at specific thoughts. Most of you have probably heard of cognitive behavioral therapy. It is based on the idea that your thoughts cause your emotions. And so cognitive distortions are a big part of that. If you look at this list, these are many different ways that we distort our thoughts, which then create emotions and particularly anxiety. So there's a much longer explanation. If you want to click below, you can go and I'll explain what each of these are. But if that's not necessary for you, you can just move on. Again, we're just trying to identify ways that we distort our thoughts and our perception, which then causes us to have negative emotions. Anything to add, Elizabeth?
No, I'm just kind of processing. I never thought of how I thought my thoughts were my thoughts. And I know we go back to the beginning, like where do you create thoughts? But that you're right, because sometimes I get in a blaming mode and being victim, and that's really kind of a cognitive distortion.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Very interesting. And once I identify it, then I can keep it from causing me more anxiety.
Right. When we talk about thoughts creating emotions, you have to remember that what happens doesn't in and of itself have a value of good or bad. Once we see it, we perceive it, and we judge what it means to us, then it has emotional value. It doesn't have emotional value until we have decided what it means for us. And if we have these cognitive distortions, we are deciding things in a distorted way so that we see things that aren't actually bad as bad for us. So understanding these and learning how to assess for these allows you to change what you're looking at so you stop being upset about it.
I know we go into a lot more detail in the video below, but can you just give me just one example of just what it means, like filtering?
Well, the one you brought up is blaming. So if I'm doing something, but I'm blaming someone else for making me do it, then I'm going to be upset and feel like a victim, as you said. I'm going to be angry with the other person when in fact, nobody makes me do much of anything. I choose based on the consequences or whatever, whether I'm going to do it or not. So looking outward and saying, oh, you made me do, look what you made me do. Now I have to be all mad at you. No, I don't have to be mad at anybody. I just did this thing. Now I just undo this thing or fix it as best I can. I don't have to be upset.
Got it.
A lot of shoulds. I recommend that people monitor their interior discussion constantly and get rid of should, must, and ought. I can tell you if you say I should, one thing that I can tell you for sure is that you're not, because you wouldn't be saying should. And if you're not, whose rule is it? Who's saying you should? If you think you should, then do it. But if you don't think you should, stop shaming yourself with this word and these comments in your own head. So these are things that you can assess rationally, and then the meaning of what you're telling yourself changes and the emotion of what you're telling yourself changes. So you can eliminate a lot of anxiety if you don't have all of these things going on in your head all the time. Mindset changing exercises are about attitude. We've looked at thoughts, we've looked at distorted thoughts, and now we're going to look at attitude. How I approach something is my attitude about it. So we have discovered with all kinds of, there's been a lot of research. And strangely enough, if you look for something you're grateful for, that is that you sit and say, okay, what am I grateful for? Just the act of searching inside yourself for this thing that you're grateful for has a calming effect on your mood, even if you don't find anything. I find that astonishing, because I would think if I couldn't find anything, I'd be frustrated. But I can always find something that I can be grateful for, because I live in a developed nation. So I have plumbing, I have air conditioning, I have a house, I have a grocery store, I have roads, I have a car. I mean, start from there and you can always be grateful for something. But gratitude and appreciation change the way you experience the world. If I have an attitude of gratitude or appreciation and I go out into the world, the way I interact with people will be very different than if I go out feeling like I'm deprived, I'm angry, I've got a chip on my shoulder. People are going to react to me very differently depending on which attitude I present to the world. So not only do I feel better, but I get much better responses from the world if I can have this attitude of gratitude and appreciation. So we're going to talk some more about how to get that. Any questions?
that just kind of blows my mind that there's actually scientific research that says just being grateful for something could change everything in your path. That
Absolutely.
is so cool. Oh my
But if
goodness.
we stop and think about it, of course, if I'm going around with a smile on my face, people are going to react differently than if I'm running around looking really mad and off-putting and like I'm getting ready to punch somebody. Clearly, my experiences are going to be very different from the entire world.
Yep.
So it's not that I'm forcing the world to do something. It's that I'm approaching the world from the right perspective.
Ugh.
So
as a control freak, I love that.
Well, that's probably something you can control if you use these exercises. As always, if you don't use them, they don't do anything for you. That's always been difficult for me because I tend to know these things, but I don't necessarily always put them into practice. So daily journaling. Journaling is something that a lot of people shy away from because for whatever reason, they don't think they can write or they think it's too hard. But daily journaling can be super, super simple. It can be just jotting down a few very minor things. It's not like you have to write a whole book. You're not trying to be Anne Frank or somebody who's writing this huge book every single time you sit down. So if you want to increase your gratitude, sit down every evening and write 3 to 5 things, people, or events that you're grateful for. And really try to reach in and think of 3 to 5 things that you really feel gratitude for today. You really appreciated these things happening today. You can make this a really rote exercise where you write down the same thing. Oh, I've got indoor plumbing. That isn't going to help you nearly as much as if you write down these 3 to 5 things at the end of the day that you have been grateful for this day. Any of this journaling at the end of the day causes you to go through the whole day looking for the 3 to 5 things. So you have an attitude of exploring every moment, looking for something that you appreciate. Instead of what our natural bias is to look for something going wrong. Because where something's going wrong is where danger would normally come from. Most of us are not looking for danger because we're not in the jungle. We don't have those kind of dangers. What we need to do is have a conscious effort to start looking for other things. And if you know you're going to have to write them down at the end of the day, that gives you the motivator to look for them. So you can do this with gratitude. You can do this with beauty. I find this one particularly helpful to me. I go through the day and I just watch for something beautiful. Anything I see, I chalk up and I put in my little memory. It's getting smaller every day, I think. But I put it in my memory and I have to hold on to it to the end of the day. And I compare all the beautiful things because I have to pick the most beautiful one. So I've got a catalog of beauty sitting in my head, which tends to make my attitude a lot more positive.
I like that.
I really like this one. Anything can be beautiful, anything at all. The way the sun comes through the window, anything at all. Once you get used to this, you start to see beauty everywhere, and it just changes your experience of everything. Self-acceptance. Most people, certainly almost all the people I work with, have a real challenge with accepting themselves. And that is self-acceptance, not after I lose X number of pounds, or after I do this, or after I get my degree, or after I make this much money, or after I do. No, right now. Self-acceptance right now. You are exactly who you are supposed to be. You have to start from where you are. You can't start from where you think you should be. You can't start from where you thought you were going to be. You can't start from anywhere but where you are. And you have to accept yourself as you are to do this with any sort of comfort. So in this practice is to write down 3 to 5 traits or events or things that you've done, accomplishments during the day that you're proud of. If you happen to be depressed, getting out of bed can be that thing. If you're really, really anxious, if you're afraid to go into public, or you're afraid to be around crowds, going to the grocery store can be that thing. Whatever you're proud of today for who you are today, whatever that is, write them down. And then sometimes it's really nice to go back and look at some of the ones that you've written before, because we tend to forget. We tend to be really, really critical and we forget. But oh my goodness, I appreciated all these. Look at the progress I've made. And that's a really helpful journal to have. Anything come to mind?
This is really, because I've been working this year on improving my self-esteem, sending love to myself. And this would be one of those reminders that I do a good job. I don't, that is just, I love this. I wrote it down because I'm going to start doing this. And it doesn't have to be a lot. You just jot down a few things. To me, it's always like writing my resume. About once a year, I update my resume no matter what. And it just blows my mind. Oh my gosh, look at all the stuff I've done. And it makes me feel good.
Yeah, any accomplishments, you can have them for work and personal. Your accomplishment for your job or something that you've done, writing them down with a fairly specifically will allow you to formulate them to put in a resume later. That's a really good idea too. So that there could be two, what I did that I'm proud of in self-development, or just something I did to accept myself. I didn't call myself stupid all day long. That might be it. Some people have that interior dialogue that is just cruel. You'd never say those things to anyone else. So we don't want to do those. We don't want to do that to ourselves. That can't be useful. It just keeps us discouraged. There's some other gratitude and appreciation exercises that you can do with a partner, or you can do with your family. I have seen this particular appreciation exercise done with partners turn a relationship around in a matter of days. Because what happens with relationships is you get into this rut of being frustrated with each other, and you only see what you don't like. You stop seeing anything that you like about each other. And if you make a commitment to sit down for 5 minutes a day, that's a long time.
Yes.
5 minutes, you've got to fill the 5 minutes, not each, but together. You fill the 5 minutes expressing what you've appreciated from the other person or about the other person in the last 24 hours. This forces you to start watching closely to catch your partner doing something you like. Because instead of just seeing what's wrong, you start to see what's going well. And once you can say that positively, and you need to sit and actually look at each other, you need to say it genuinely and with feeling to the other person. And the other person needs to be looking at you and trying to accept it and allow it to penetrate their heart. And when you're finished, you say, thank you. That's it. Just thank you. One thing
Wow.
It is wonderful to hear that somebody's that your partner has noticed and appreciated something that you took the energy to do. And often you'll be surprised. Something that's important, or they really noticed you didn't even think about doing. It was just rote almost.
Yeah.
But it shifts the perspective so dramatically that it has shocked me on a number of occasions how much progress couples can make just in a few days of this particular approach. And then you sit for 5 minutes, but after you sit for 5 minutes, now all electronics have to be put away. There's no phone, there's no TV, there's no electronics whatsoever, preferably after the kids are in bed, so that you have this undivided attention to give to each other. But when you do this, you will find that you want to talk to each other, that you want to be with each other again in a way that you didn't before. I think that this is probably an exercise that should be taught at every premarital class, because
Yeah.
it will help keep the relationship happy and loving. And you'll get so you do it all the time throughout the day. And you might not need to sit, but I would still recommend that you take 5 minutes a day to just sit down and make sure you're giving each other your undivided attention. Because you'd be surprised how little undivided attention we give to each other. The same is true for your family. Oh, did you want to say something, Elizabeth?
No, no, I just am agreeing. It's just, again, this is one of those things, just how, if you feel like your marriage is kind of starting to go down a path, you don't even have to go to counseling if you just started doing this.
Yeah, it can help you a lot.
Yeah.
Once you have kind, warm regard for one another again, you can work through some really difficult things. But if you're starting from a basis of feeling completely bereft and mistreated and completely scarce love or affection or kindness, there isn't any anywhere, it's really hard to bring up any difficult conversation without just being completely defensive.
Cool.
Another thing that I strongly recommend is that the whole family do a variation of this. Most of us, or at least in my time, we were discouraged from bragging. And that seemed to include commenting on anything we did well. It could be called bragging, and it would be discouraged. You're getting too big for your britches. You've got a big head. All of these really negative comments just when you were feeling very proud of yourself for something you really did do. And legitimate pride in your accomplishments is a way that we maintain our self-esteem, and we accept ourselves. So don't take this away from your children. In fact, encourage it. I suggest if you sit down to meals, which I also suggest would be a good thing, but if you don't sit down at mealtime, take 10 minutes where the whole family sits down and talks about, what did you do today that you're proud of? What did you do today that was really fun? So that each person gets an opportunity to brag a little bit and everybody else can be cheerleaders. That, I think, will change the way that your children interact with you. It'll change the way that your whole family interacts with each other. And instead of being, like these situational comedies, these sitcoms where everybody's putting everybody down and it's just all these one zingers about lines that, it's just snarky. There's so much of that everywhere that's what kids are patterning on. And I think we need to have some appreciation instead. Anyway, a long way to say, use your mealtime to appreciate each other and let everybody share their pride in their accomplishments.